Hello lovely people, I'm K3N and welcome to week 22 of our Slowstitch project for 2024. This week I've been thinking a lot since last week's prompt, which was inspired by Japanese borrow, and I showed you my dad's quilt and so forth, about comfort and the comfort that comes from blankets, which made me think about blanket stitch. So this week we're going to look at the blanket stitch. Also I've been seeing lots of people in the Facebook group and on Instagram and so on using the blanket stitch in lovely inventive ways. And it's a stitch I used a lot on the quilt that I made 2 years ago for the last lot of exhibitions that I did with CQ West. The quilt which I saw hanging on my friend's living room wall when I stayed with her in England recently. So all those things have kind of come together and got me thinking about comfort and blankets and blanket stitch and so forth. And Stell's also needs comfort because she misses Sirius. I know she does, and she's very more clingy and cuddly than usual. So yeah, so I thought a little bit of comfort for all of us. We'll do some blanket stitching. I'm going to use some little scraps of cloth from things that belong to my dad, and I encourage you to do the same if that's something you'd like to do, or just whatever cloth brings you joy. So let me go and sit at my desk and we'll get into it. Okay, just to clarify, when I said I encourage you to also use cloth, I didn't it sounded like I meant, from my dad's things. Obviously that's not possible. I meant cloths that are precious to you. Sorry. So what I've got, if you want to, gather your things in advance, is I've got a foundation piece, and I've chosen this little piece. It's wool, it's not blanket because that would be really thick, and my book's getting fat. It's just a piece of wool. You could use flannel or just a piece of cotton if you wanted to. I've got a little piece of very old hanky, which has been, I think I tea dyed it, and I didn't use it in my dad's quilt. It's just a tiny scrap. And it's got a little hole in, and I might do something when I come to that, something different. And then I've got a little strip of his pyjamas. Someone commented when I was using his pyjamas before, what would he have thought of me showing his pyjamas here on YouTube? He would have thought it was funny, I'm sure. So I thought I'm going to take a little piece of this to use as well. And then I've got some dark blue thread. It's got Fred hair all over it. He's been in my basket. It's a coton à reprise, which is French mending cotton, but it's slightly thinner than embroidery floss, but you could use embroidery floss equally, or cotton pearl if that's what you like to stitch with or whatever. And I've also got a bit of red out of my orts because I thought it would be nice to add a little accent of red. And I've got my new scissors, thank you Sue, onto which I have put a bit of twine to mark them from the old scissors so that I don't cut paper or anything with them, because they're identical looking, but they work so much better. So Sue was a lady who came to my exhibition in England, or our exhibition in England, and left these for me. It was a day I wasn't there, but thank you so much. That was so kind. And I've got needles and pins and so forth. So that's it. Minimal supplies as per usual. So I'm going to start by, I think I want to do a radiating stitching with the blanket stitch, but I want to have centre to it, so I thought I'll make a little hole in my cloth and put some of this behind it. I'm not sure if I want the dark blue or the light. Yeah, I think I'm going to go for the darker blue, and do some eyelet stitching to start with. So I'm going to first make my hole, which is easier to do before you attach it all together. What about if I made the hole out there? No, I want to do something with that different. No, I'm going to go in the middle somewhere. I'm just going to do a little snip and just cut a raggedy hole. These scissors are so sharp. Just a little hole. It doesn't have, if you want an exact circle, then you could draw around something. I'll put that in the scraps. There we go. And then behind that, I'm going to put some of the blue. So you don't have to cut a circle of your cloth that goes behind. You just have to make sure it's big enough, to extend past the edges. So I'm just going to cut that square out and see where I get to. That's probably way too much. I might just cut it slightly smaller. Just because I like cutting. I used these first on last Wonky Wednesday. And when I watched it back, I saw I was cutting things right, left and centre. Just because they're so nice to cut with. That's better. I'm not wasting those other little bits. I'm just going to position it so it stays behind the hole. Now you see the edges of the hole are a bit jaggedy, but it doesn't matter. They'll get hidden with stitching. I'm going to put a few pins. I might put 1 or 2 pins right there where I've got that little scrap so it doesn't move. And then I've got some in my needle already. That happens to be 1 strand of floss because it was in my orts, but it's just for the basting, so you know, any fine sewing thread. And I'm going to baste first, I think, just around the edge of my little hole that I've made. This will all be very familiar to you if you've watched the eyelet stitch video, and the what's coming later will also be somewhat familiar if you've watched the blanket stitch video. Both those videos are in the Slowstitch playlist, if you haven't seen them. I'm just doing the tiny back stitch and the bigger on the front and the bigger forward stitch on the back, as per usual. Get the pin out. Just to make sure that's all anchored down. I looked up the etymology of the word blanket because I didn't know, and it comes from the French word blanc, which means white, because originally a blanket was a piece of undyed cloth, and then there was a kind of wool that was made that was referred to as blank or blanc, B-L-A-N-K-E. So it could also come from that, and there was another, back to the beginning, yeah. There was another possible attribution. I'm going to just finish off and then just go around the edge as well. To someone called Thomas Blanket, or Blanquet, who lived in Bristol in the UK. He was actually Flemish, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, so from Belgium. And he was, I think, a wool merchant. But he was in the, I can't remember now, 16th, 17th century, something like that. And there are recorded uses of the word blanket earlier than that. So that's, you know, one of those things that it's attributed to his name, but it probably isn't. But it's interesting, you know, I find those kinds of things interesting. The other thing that I came across that I found interesting was that Shakespeare was the first to use the word blanket as a verb, you know, to blanket something, like we talk about, for example, the snow blanketing the ground. And that was in King Lear, which is one of my favourite Shakespeare plays. I studied it for A-level. I don't know the story of King Lear. He has 3 daughters, and it's, you know, like a 3 or 4 hour play, but I'll try and explain it briefly. He has 3 daughters, and he's getting a bit old and sensitive in his old age, and he asks all his daughters to demonstrate to him how much they love him. And the 2 elder daughters, the sort of shades of Cinderella really, with the 2 elder daughters and the younger daughter, you know, make all these kinds of effusive statements about their love for him and pander to his vanity, basically. So, you know, he finds that wonderful. And then the younger daughter, Cordelia, says she cannot give him all her love because she loves other people as well, and, you know, so on and so on. So they fall out, and then it all kicks off, and all kinds of things happen. And the end's very sad. And I was very lucky to see it at Stratford-on-Avon, which is Shakespeare's hometown in England, many years ago when I was at sixth form college, which I think is like high school in the States, you know, from 16 to 18. Our English literature course people, all of us went on a coach and watched it with Michael Gambon as Lear, I believe. I always confuse Michael Gambon and Michael Hordern. I'm pretty sure it was Michael Gambon. But I do remember that one of the ugly sister daughters, Regan, Regan and Goneril they're called, was played by Jenny Agutter, who first came to fame as Bobby in The Railway Children. And one of our gang, a chap called Wayne Wilson, who we always called Willie, was absolutely mad about Jenny Agutter. So we had to go round to the stage door after the play so that he could meet her and get her autograph. So we were standing outside the stage door, a bit nervous because we weren't supposed to be there. We were supposed to have gone straight back to the coach. And Willie's getting increasingly, agitated and so on to meet his heroine, bearing in mind we're 16, 17 years old. I guess Jenny Agutter must have been in her 20s or 30 or something like that at the time. I'm not exactly sure. And just before the cast started coming out of the stage door, Willie, who normally wore quite thick, heavy glasses, had put his contact lenses in so that, he looked his best for Jenny. One of his contact lenses popped out. So we're all on our hands and knees on the pavement trying to find it for him because he couldn't see a thing without it. And he's on his hands and knees looking for his contact lens, and he looked up and he found it and he put it in. And he looked up, and on her hands and knees in front of him, helping him look, was, you've guessed it, Jenny Agutter. And she was absolutely lovely. And that little story's brought me to the end of my basting. I've seen her in recent years in, what's it called? It's a UK spy series. I think it's called Spooks. She played a baddie in that, actually. That was from quite a few years ago. Anyway, Jenny Agutter. Yeah, she was lovely. And he got her autograph, and he got a little peck on the cheek as well from her. And I remember, I'm certain he remembers, he's probably never washed his cheek since. Okay, so I've done my basting. So I'm going to do, I think I might do that in the red, around my little eyelet. Oh, it's raining again, just for a change. Getting a bit fed up with the rain, to be honest. I remember all last summer complaining that it was too hot and dry, and, well, not only me, but everybody. I'm not complaining, but wishing it would rain, and now it's gone to the other extreme. And I've just heard from watching Machteld that in Holland they've had very serious flooding recently, people's homes. It's quite awful. Right, so I've got 2 strands of my red. It's quite a dark red. I thought it would be nice against the dark blue. I hope everything's set up right, and maybe I should have done a test, because I haven't actually made one of these for a few weeks now. Oh no, that's not true. I did make one. I did Wonky Wednesday, and that's okay. So I've just come up just into the navy blue, just off the edge of the tea dyed, and I'm just going to do first of all some stitches quite far apart. Do you see? So I'm going up and back in like this, and you can do it either way. You could come up into. Actually, that's better. I'm going to do that. Sometimes if the edge of your cloth is fragile, as this is, it's better to come over it and down in, because if you keep coming up, you're pulling up against that edge all the time, and that can make it, tattery and torn. So I'm coming up, and you can come up where you like, you can do tiny or big, or I just, in general, just vary. So I'm going down into the blue and coming up into the tea dyed, and I in general make one entire pass of stitches a bit wider apart just to hold all the edges down, and then I go round again and fill in. You could also, if you wanted to go straight in with the blanket stitch, of course you could blanket stitch your edge as well, also possible. I don't know if you can hear the rain. The terrace roof is just under my window and it's metal, so the rain on it is quite loud. So I can hear the rain, I can hear Stella gently snoring on the little sofa behind me. I'll try not to go to sleep myself, they're both quite soothing sounds. If I stop talking and stitching for any length of time, all shout wake up. It's funny, it's only an hour time difference between here and England, but it does take me a while to adjust. Which, you know, you'd think an hour wouldn't make any difference, but there we go. And I'm probably also tired from all the things I did while I was there. So now I'm just going to go back round in between and fill in the gaps. I just think it's handier to go around once and get everything anchored down. So now I like my stitches to be straightish, but you know, because if I went down there it would be under an angle, but that's all personal choice. You do you, as always. But that's what I aim for, a straight stitch and an angle to the next place I want to come out. Yes, I'll tell you more as I go along, you know, when I don't have to tell you stitch related things about what we're doing, about things I did in England. I had a very nice time. So I arrived on the Thursday in the afternoon / evening, well, late afternoon, and it was lovely weather, bizarrely. Well, not bizarrely, but I mean, it's strange. Normally the weather here is sunny and there it's rainy, but the whole week, apart from one day of quite heavy rain, was lovely sunshine. And Hans said that here it rained nearly all week. It's just the way it goes, I suppose. And then on the Friday I went to the gallery for the exhibition and did my first stint of stewarding, and was greeted by my scissors, which lovely Sue had left for me, and a couple of other things that people had left, some lovely gifts of scraps of cloth and cards, and yeah, it's just lovely. And then quite a few people came in who watched me here, and I won't name check everybody, because if I name check everybody I'm bound to forget someone. I should have written it all down, but you know who you are. I wouldn't want to name check some people and, do you know what I mean, miss someone out accidentally. But anyway, suffice it to say, there were lots of lovely people came. It was lovely to meet them in person, and many of them also brought their stitch journals, their stitch meditation scrolls to show me, and it's so wonderful to see in person. Just wonderful to be able to sit there and go through the journals and chat to the people about them and so on. I wish I could do that with all of you. Wouldn't that be something? So, pardon me, so it was a very good day, a very busy day. Oh, I arrived early, I should say. I got there especially early in the morning before anybody started arriving to make the little video that I put up for those of you that couldn't come. So yeah, so that was lovely. And then I went back to my friends and we had a nice meal. I can't remember what, but I do know I had lots of lovely food while I was there. And then on the Saturday, I can't remember what we did anymore, but I'm sure it was nice. What did we do on the Saturday? Can't remember. Oh yes, yeah, we went out to a local place. That was night in the countryside. I think it was converted farm buildings and, alongside the canal, and we had, well, it was coffee and cake time. It was sort of mid-morning, but I saw that they had cream teas, which, if you're not English or you don't know, or British, is a scone or a scone with clotted cream, which I believe is a Cornish invention. I don't know if it exists elsewhere in the world, but it's a very, very thick cream, and jam. It's usually strawberry jam. Well, that's what I like, strawberry jam. I'm just going to go back round the other way to fill in what I've missed. And a pot of English tea. And I had that for 11 cents, although normally it's eaten at tea time. And there's a big controversy you know, that divides families across generations about whether you put the cream on first or the jam on first. Now, I believe in Cornwall it's jam first. If you're Cornish or Devonian, and I'm getting it the wrong way round, feel free to correct me, of course. I believe in Cornwall it's jam then cream. And that to me is logical, because if you had strawberries and cream, you would put the cream on top, wouldn't you? You wouldn't put the cream in your bowl and then the strawberries on top. Well, you might, but you know, more conventional is the other way. And in Devon, they view the cream as the butter and put the cream on first and then the jam. So yeah, so that people, you know, there are whole debates about that. It's in a very light-hearted way, I hope, always. But I'm not Cornish, but I am of the Cornish way of putting my jam on and then my cream. And it was a huge scone. It was about this big and about this high, but I did manage to eat it all with a huge pot of cream and a huge pot of jam, and I have just pulled my thread out. So that was that day, and there was nice little shops there, and it was just nice. And then on the Sunday I was back stewarding again. That was our final day, and again there were lots of lovely people came in, brought me their work, looked at the exhibition, had lovely chats. It was just wonderful. I really enjoyed it. And then the rest of the week we did various things. Well, obviously there was the meeting on Wednesday, the CQS meeting, which went very well. And we went to a quilt show at Malvern. That was a bit disappointing, really. It was about a 2-hour drive. My friend drove. And we went with a friend of hers who I hadn't met before, but we got on like a house on fire, and she does watch me sometimes. Hello, Amanda, if you're watching. So we drove 2 hours to the Malvern Quilt Show, and we were there. It had trade stands, you know, people selling cloth and quilty related stuff, you know, the kind of stuff you get at these places, all that stuff. And also there was an open competition, so people had made work and sent it in, and that was all hung. But what we'd really gone to see it was called the Quilt Display, or the Feature Displays, and that were quilts from well-known quilters, including, you know, friends and colleagues of ours, and quilts from SAQUA, which is the Studio Art Quilts Associates, which is a global organisation. There was supposed to be a big display of their quilts. So we walked round and round and round. We couldn't find this display, and in the end I went and asked the organisers and was told that they hadn't hung it because of space restrictions. So we were, needless to say, very disappointed, because we'd driven all that way, and to find that none of it was there was, yeah, very disappointing to say the least. And we were a little bit cross as well, because it was all over the advertising, but nowhere had they said that it wouldn't be displayed. So, yeah, that was a bit upsetting. So from there we went and had some lunch. To console ourselves, we had chips, which in England is French fries, but English chips are chunky. And I wanted even more consoling than the other two, so I had cheesy chips, which is chips with melted cheese on top. Very, very healthy lunch, not. But there we go. And at the Malvern Quilt Show, I saw a very old friend of mine, pardon me, I've got a frog in my throat, a very old friend of mine who I haven't seen for years, who also she was a student of mine. That's how I first met her. And then later she joined CQ West, but she's since moved on. But anyway, I had a lovely chat with her. And while I was chatting with her, other Helen went by. Hello Helen, who was one of our lovely people who came to see me at the exhibition, and who very kindly bought me a glue stick. Helen, the glue stick's fine. She was a bit worried that she'd given me the wrong one. She messaged me saying she thought she'd given me the wrong glue stick. It's absolutely fine, it's brand new and it works, so thank you so much. Why a glue stick? Because I'd mentioned in a Wonky Wednesday that I'd given my only glue stick to Lily. But anyway, so I bumped into Helen at the Malvern Quilt Show as well, so that was nice to see her again. And what else? Can't remember what else we did. Oh, and yes, that's right. Then Joey came, my son Joey. He was in England. He'd been down to Southampton to visit an old friend of his who's at university there. And he came up on the train to a station about half an hour away from where I was staying, so I went and picked him up. And then he came and stayed with my friends and me for the last couple of days, and we flew back to France together. So there we go. That's a brief summary of my trip. I would love to show you all the things that I was given. Oh yes, I also went to a car boot sale, which is like a, if you don't know, I don't know what they call them in other countries. Basically, you put stuff in your car boot that you don't want anymore and you drive it to a big field somewhere. You know, it's obviously all organised, you don't just randomly do it. And people come and you pay a little donation to get in, which went to a charity. And then you go around and you buy other people's stuff, you know. So it's in general private people. It's not people doing it professionally. It's, you know, in France they call it vide grenier, and they have them in towns on the pavement, not necessarily with cars, but which means vide grenier means empty in the attic. So anyway, we went to one of those, and that was nice. There were some nice things. I didn't get a lot. What did I? Oh, I bought some second-hand Doc Martens. That's a couple of young... I kept saying they were young women, and then my friend pointed out that they were probably in their 40s, but to me they were young women. They were selling some stuff to raise money because they were going to go off camping, or in a camper van, sponsored. And I've been racking my brains trying to remember what they were raising money for. But anyway, it seemed all like a good cause, and they had these bright purple Doc Martens in my size. So I thought, well, in order to support them, plus I wanted the boots, you know, let's be honest, I wanted the bright purple Doc Martens. I'm not going to lie. And they belonged to one of the young women. But she was parting with them. She didn't get on with them. So, but I can't show you any of these things because I didn't have enough room to take it all back with me, or to bring it all back with me. So I've left most of it there until I go next time. I've left most of it at my friend's house. Oh yes, another lady brought me a big bag full of wooden spools. A lady brought me some wool that she'd spun herself. It's an absolutely beautiful little ball of cream wool. A lady brought me a big bag of scraps from her collection of cloth. I'm not going to say this word. And in there as well was a book that I've been looking for second-hand for a long time, which is The Country Diary of an Edwardian Lady. I don't think I've ever mentioned it. I think it's just pure chance, or she thought I'd like it. But thank you so much. That was Claire, I think, who brought me that lovely bag of goodies. If I'm forgetting anything that anybody brought me, I do apologise. If I think of anything further, I'll mention it. But I wanted to do a little video sharing it with all of you and thanking everybody while I was there, but I just couldn't because, you know, I didn't have the setup, and so that will come at one point. Right, anyway, I'm going mad with this, and this eyelet stitch, I can't seem to stop. I'll call that done now, I think. It's just a wonderful thing to do, and the feel of it, you know. Look at that, there we go. So I'm going to finish off that bit of red now and get onto the blanket stitch. Just a couple of stitches on the back. Put that red back in the aughts. Looks nice against the gold as well, the red. And let's get some of this blue stars off. You hear it ticking on the floor. So pleased with my snippy fiskers. Thank you, Sue. Wondering how many strands to use, because like I said, this is much finer than, I think I'm just going to use 2 strands. This is much finer than embroidery floss. Or should I use 3? In general, I can split it 2 at a time without it tangling. Yes, I can. I think 2's okay. And I always like to use 2 because it's 4, so then you can use 2 and 2. I suppose otherwise you can use your leftover one with 2 from the next one and so on. But anyway, I'm using 2. Stop overthinking your thread, Catherine. Right, so I'm just going to start somewhere around my centre and spiral out with blanket stitch. So I'm going to come up somewhere slightly away from the red. I think I'll leave a little gap. Now it's exactly the same as doing blanket stitch, you know, around the edge of a blanket, except you're doing it on the flat. And I've referred to on the flat before, and a few people have said, what do you mean? Well, I just mean, you know, on here rather than on the edge. So you want to always make sure, I hope I'm not going blurry or anything, that your thread is behind your needle. So my thread's coming up there. So then if you sort of visualize a triangle on your cloth, so I'm coming out of one point of the triangle, and so the other point is here, and then the third point's down here. So I'm going to come down through the diagonal point of the triangle and then come up through that point. Do you see what I mean? Do you see? Making sure that the thread that's coming out is behind so that it gets trapped, and that's it. So basically all you're doing is you've got that loop that would be that diagonal, and you've trapped it to lay like that, and that's all there is to it, and you just keep doing that all the way around. Now normally you would, you know, conventionally keep all your stitches neat and even, and you might draw lines and to make sure they're all straight and the same length and so on. I like to really play with the spacing and the length and everything, so I would really encourage you to experiment. So for this next one, you know, to have it even, I would go the same distance across, the same distance down. I'm gonna go much further down and maybe closer together, and just trap that thread behind there as I come up. And then I'm going to go over there, I'm going to come right down over here and come under an angle, like that. And then I might come up small. And I've trapped something there that shouldn't be there, but it's coming through from the back. Always sometimes, you know what I mean. Sometimes your little thread tails on the back get pulled through to the front, don't they? That's right. So you don't want to pull it too tight, but you just want enough tension so that it lays nice and flat. So this time I think I'm going to angle that way. Hope you can see what I'm doing with my big fat thumb in the way. Do you see how they're all wonky? Wonky. And I'm just going to work my way around doing that wherever I think. Sometimes the strands of this mending cotton, for me, don't stay together as well as the strands of floss. It's maybe because I pull them off 2 at a time. Haha, I just thought of that. I think it's maybe better to pull them off individually and then lay them back together. So you can go as big or as small as you like. I would really say just experiment and see what you like the look of. Big or small, that's what makes it mindful for me. Just deciding where the next stitch is going to go. If you really want to sort of see in advance, you can kind of audition it, you know, like if I come right down there, or as we go along the auditioning makes more sense when you've already got a round in. got a round in. That's what they say in pubs in England. Have you got a round in, which means have you been and bought the drinks for everybody? That's not what I mean. So I'm coming back round to the beginning, and then I can come back up where I came out. Do you see that little stick that's all on its own there? If I sort of make sure I come up somewhere in that same place, get my thread round, then you can't see where you started. So then I need to trap that last loop, so I'll go down just the other side of it. You see that loop's coming up there, so I'm just going to go down the other side of the loop. I can go down through the same hole, and then you trap that loop into place, and that's my first round. So then I'm going to come up somewhere nearby. Now if you come up here, where that stick is, all your sticks will line up. So if that's a look that you want, that's what you do. But I prefer to come up somewhere in the gap between the two. And if you come slightly lower, this is where you can really start playing. So I'm slightly lower than that point there. Then you can go through that, and it's easier to go through with the eye of your needle. You can go through the leg of that stitch with your thread, and you make another shape before you start your next blanket stitch. So then I'll come down here and make my blanket stitch, and then when I come up here again, I want to make sure I'm lower than that. Because if you come out up there somewhere, you'll trap your thread up there, and that's the shape you'll get. I just don't find that as attractive as, you know, getting that nice angle. So I just make sure I come out, do you see what I mean, lower, like that, do you see? And then if I went back up through there again, through that stitch, let's do it, why not, with the eye of my needle. You see I've made a little, it's in fact a hexagon, 1, 2, 3, 4, no, a pentagon. I've made a pentagon, 5 sides, a little cell shape. If you look up online, there's you can find microscopic pictures from Ernst Haeckel, I think it's pronounced. Beautiful pictures from under microscopes. It's quite an old book. And this, unfortunately, post-pandemic, looking at microscopic things has different connotations for us now, but you know, like, think of plant cells or things like that, where you have all these little cells. It's wonderful for that. So you see, if I went in there now and trapped it there, I'd make another pentagon. Or I could, I always like to link them up. You could do them separate, you know, you could not link up. Well, let's just try coming in up there. So I'm going to come up there, so those two, do you see, now those two are in line. So it's just what look you like. You can vary it, you can audition. So I lay my thread there. If I went up to there, I'd get this little shape here. Do you see? Do you see? Do you see? Or if I went through there and back, I think that's what I'm going to do. So it's just playing with the placement, the size, whether you thread through or not. You know, you can thread through sometimes, you can thread through always, you can not thread through at all. Endless possibilities. You can, and there you see, I can say to myself, is that a pleasing shape if I do that? Or do I want to cross over? You know, you can cross your stitches. I think I'm going to thread through because I'm liking how that's looking. Hey, backstells. And take a tiny stitch down there and see how that looks. Oh, I've got a knot. What's happened? That's happened. It's alright. So you see, I've got bigger spaces, smaller spaces, and you get all that from varying your stitch. So here's a big gap. I'm going to take an extra stitch in there. So then I'd get this elongated hexagon if I then went up to there. Or I could take another extra stitch first, always making sure my loop's trapped. And then that would come out quite squared off. I'm going to thread through, turn my needle around. That would be a long skinny shape, but I quite like that because it's something a bit different. I think I'm going to come up here first though, actually make it slightly less skinny. No, it's not remotely skinny now, but anyway. I'm going to thread through there. And I'm just going to carry on playing like that. there I'm going to come up where I went down. You see I didn't thread through, I just came up in the same point. And that's basically all there is to it. It's just playing with the placement, the length, whether you link the stitches together or not, whether you line them up. But when you see it, when you see the result of it, I know when I first saw it, it looked very complex, very hard to do and so on. But it's not really, you know, it's not really. I have faith in all of you. And I saw quite a few people saying, I'm going to thread through there, I better change this, I'm going to pull it out of the needle again. Quite a few people admiring, quite rightly, the lovely work, but kind of implying that they didn't think they'd be able to do it, or I'm just going to come straight down like a false stitch to end off. And so I thought, well, I've been thinking about blankets and comfort, let's do it. Let's encourage you all to have a go. I didn't take very lazy girl threads because I knew of the threading through. That's another tip. Don't, you know, if you're someone who, like me, often pulls off a great long length, to avoid having to rethread your needle so often. For this, where you're having to thread it through, or, you know, not having to, but you know what I mean, threading it through, it's quite cool on the back as well. It doesn't really buy you any time because the threading through takes much longer. Now, where was I? I mean, even if I started somewhere different, it wouldn't matter. It's not that you have to do perfect radiating circles of, you know, of stitching. But I'm going to come up where I went down, or where I should have gone down, which is here, before I made that false stitch. And then I'm going to come, I think I'm going to come right down here. And then go back up through with my eye. Through that, under that stitch, just under the stitch. That's why it's good to use the eye, because then you're not in danger of catching the cloth. I'm going to come there where that. So I hope you've got the idea. You can obviously go back and watch that section again if you need to. So I won't keep going on about it. I shall talk about something else and just carry on. Don't know what I'm going to talk about. Expect something will come to me. Happened there. You see now I've caught done something weird there. That's alright. It'll do, pig. It's a bit winky wonky, but it'll do. Oh yes. Last week with the borrow piece, inspired piece, I didn't put a words or a quote or anything because I couldn't, you know, nothing came to me in the moment. And knew I could rely on all you lovely people to come up with things for me. Many of you mentioned the Dolly Parton song, The Coat of Many Colours, which is perfect. So I've written the title of that song in my journal. Oh, Stells, is there another fly? Get down. Sometimes she thinks she's a cat. There's a fly. She jumped up on the windowsill. She sees Fred doing these things and she thinks, why not? Yeah, the Dolly Parton song, Coat of Many Colours. If you don't know it, I'm sure you can find the lyrics to it, or even Dolly herself singing it somewhere. And another woman, I think it was a woman, wrote me a haiku for my dad, which is beautiful, and I've written that in my journal as well. I'll read that to you when I sew this piece in. That was so kind of her, of them. So that's me back round to the beginning again. Whoopsie, I'm catching the edge of my thing. So you can, if it seems, you know, more fitting to your piece, just spiral and not come down and start another row. It's just see what happens, see how it goes. See what you like the look of the most. I think I sometimes do end up spiralling, it's just how the stitching works out, and other times I just start a new round, you know. But I'm really liking the blue and red. Blue was my dad's favourite colour. I'm going to end that one off. I'm going to anchor that down there because the angle would have been wrong otherwise. So I've just anchored that down. And now I'm just going to, what am I going to do now? I'm just going to come up here at the foot of that stitch, if you will call it like that, and go in through there. So even though you're predominantly blanket stitching, as you can see, you can just as easily place the odd straight stitch or whatever you think is necessary so that you find it pleasing to look at and pleasant to do. I'm going through there again. So do you see I've now got a closed space here? So when I come round again, I can just put in a little leg if I think it looks, if it needs it, if it looks strange. I'm going to go through there, I think. Ouch! Don't stab yourself, Catherine. It is quite, it does take some concentration, so apologies for not chatting. Oops, and this cloth's very fragile, I can even get the eye through it. Yeah, many of you talked about your dads and how they had hankies as well. It's such a dad thing, isn't it? And of course hankies as well as blankets can bring comfort, you know. If you're crying or you've grazed your knee, like I said, my dad would fashion a quick field bandage, having been a medic in the army, if I grazed my knee or something. So there's comfort in those little cloths, those little square scraps of cotton. As well as the comfort from a blanket. I mean, comfort blanket is a thing, isn't it, that little children have. Lily has still got hers. I hope she doesn't mind me saying. I think she has anyway. She certainly did the last time I went to her studio where she lives, you know, when she's at university, her little studio flat. She had a little knitted blanket that was knit by an auntie of mine. It's patchwork. It's knitted squares and sewn together in a patchwork of a sort of lemon yellow and pale blue. And we lost it once too often, so I made it into two because it was, how big was it? Maybe about 2 feet long by 18 inches wide, something of that nature. And see, I'm just going to double thread there. I'm going under 2 legs before I make a stitch, just to make that shape there. Yeah, so it got lost once too often, and we had to go back looking for it, or look for it up the garden, or wherever it was that she'd left it. So I got a bit worried that if we lost it completely, she'd be very sad. So I took it apart down the middle and made it into 2, and it's now very raggedy. She used to get really upset if I washed it because it made it smell funny, apparently. But yeah, it's just a little comfort thing, a little comfort blanket. I'm going to end off again. So I feel a little bump or something in this thread, and I'm worried it's going to snag when it's so tiny. It's looking alright, isn't it? I hope you enjoy doing this. It's a nice way to cover a piece of cloth just with essentially one stitch. I did this in the middle, but you didn't have to. You could just only do the blanket stitch. I'm going to do it 2 at a time, well, 1 at a time, and put it back together. and see if that's less snaggy. There we go. But it does take quite a lot of thread. This is my third lot of thread in my needle. But, you know, that stands to reason because you're doing quite big stitches, aren't you? Aren't we? Aren't I? I'm going to come up where I went down. That's kind of the default, so that you just carry on. And then I'm going to anchor that one as well, because I can see that if I come down here now, that loop's going to fall off the thread. Because it won't be pulling up against it. So I'm going to anchor it. And then I think I'm going to come down here somewhere and start essentially a new round. So you can do that as well, you know, there's no real rules at all, it's just to get this look. You're primarily doing blanket stitch and you're varying the size and direction and all that stuff. There's a quote that I'm going to write in my journal because King Lear put it in my head. You know, finding out that Shakespeare was the first one to say, to blanket something. From The Tempest, there's a character in The Tempest, kind of a minor character really, in terms of the whole story, called, oh my goodness, Gonzalo. Is it Gonzalo or Gonzalo? I think it's Gonzalo. I never actually studied The Tempest. I've watched, there's a film version with, with Prospera, with a female, I think is it Dame Helen Mirren? I should look these things up before I start wittering on about them. Anyway, that I have seen quite recently. But anyway, there's a character called Gonzalo who's an optimist, you know, and he's kind of a bit naive. He's a very minor character. I don't think he has a very big role, but he's kind of portrayed as being a bit naive and, you know, oh, everybody's lovely and the whole world's lovely. But there's something nice in that, I think. Something lovely in those people that are like that. Sadly, they often get taken advantage of, don't they? But he says something to console the king in a moment of grief about weighing our comfort against our sorrows. Or it's maybe the other way round. I have to look it up, won't I? Weighing our sorrows against our comfort, which sounds right. I'll look it up. Which is, you know, a nice sentiment. Now there's something weird going on here. Is that where I did it weird before? What I'm going to do is put in again a fake stitch. A fake, you know, a fake, not a blanket. No, I'm going to do that. You see where I've got that funny little arm poking out? I think it's the beginning of a previous round. I'm just going to do a blanket stitch that comes up onto it like that, and then it makes sense. Yeah, that's okay. I'm going to go down here somewhere and go back to the fairly regular thing of threading it through. Something out. That's right. I think I'm going to go right back up there with a great big stitch. See, that stitch is about ½ an inch long. And then anchor that, because that was that where I didn't have a leg, where I made that closed shape. So that just sort of integrates it more. And then I'm going to come down here again. This is also why it tends to use more. Where am I going to go? I'm going to come up here. More thread if you have to jump around like that. better. I've got myself back on track. Sometimes you get a little bit lost in the maze of cells. But you can usually put yourself right without having to unpick anything. Now you see there's a little stick with nothing on the end of it, but I don't mind that here and there. I think I'm just going to let that be. And maybe just go like that, even bigger there. Oops, let's vary the sizes a bit. Okay, and here's this little hole, which I don't really want to blanket stitch over because I think I've got another idea for that. I think I'm going to come right down there, near to it, but not over it. That's it. I'll leave that corner unblanket stitched. There's another one of those little pointy pointers. I shall leave it be. Oops, I pulled that a bit tight. I'm going to anchor that because otherwise it's going to keep falling down. Like that. And come up. Maybe there. I also like the look of it if you start small and as you get out you get bigger. I mean, I don't like it, personally I don't like it to be too regular, but overall it's a look I like. I think I'm going to have to get another new bit of thread. So it's a little bit different. I just thought, you know, it was interesting with the borrow that some people loved it and other people found it really challenging. And I know, you know, I completely understand that because it wasn't working on a foundation, was it? It was, I think I even said it during the video, it's like you're stitching into empty space. You haven't got you know, you haven't got any backing or anything to work on to. We were just picking up bits of cloth and stitching them together. And I guess that's personal preference whether you like that or not. I like doing both. I like working on a foundation, obviously, or I wouldn't do it. But I do also enjoy every now and then that sort of borrow style, you know, the way I did the borrow inspired piece. Because I do that in other ways as well. It's like crumb quilting, which you do with a sewing machine, well, not traditionally, but you know, these days, where you just sew bits together, and Victorian crazy patchwork, which we will get into at one point because that's something else I like. Just joining bits together. Although you can do both those things on a foundation, you can also just do them in mid-air, so to speak. Someone commented that it's with last week's that it was stitching in mid-air. Because I think to me using a foundation or not, it's kind of a double. There's two ways of looking at it. One, you could say that the foundation is comforting. See what I did there? You know, it gives you borders, it gives you a boundary, it gives you a base to work on, guidelines within which to work, and so on. But then the other way of looking at that is you could view it as restricting. That, you know, you can only work up to that boundary. And I think that's the way I look at it. It's one or two of those things, one of those two things. So then it depends on my mood, in a sense, or how I want to work, which I prefer. I mean, of course, you can work on a backing and then extend past the backing, and I often do, and then add another bit of backing because I want to go further. Or, you know, like with the stitch meditation scrolls, I often start with them a certain length and then I want to make them longer, so I, you know, it's not restricting in that way, but it's more kind of psychologically as you're working. Right, I'm going to end that and start a new circuit. So that was interesting that there was that response to it. Some people, it was a bit like in England we talk about Marmite. You know what Marmite is? I know down under they have Vegemite, which is the same or a similar thing. It's a yeast, it's dark brown, it's very savoury and salty, and you put it on your bread or your toast. Marmite sandwiches. Marmite on toast. If you don't know what it is, I can't really describe to you what it tastes like, because it doesn't taste like anything else on the planet. And it is said that you either love it or hate it. There's no in between. So in the UK we say it's like Marmite if it's something that people either love or hate. It's not like, I can take it or leave it. No, people aren't like that about Marmite. I think it was also a marketing campaign as well that's led us to that. I love Marmite, for the record. Marmite soldiers with a dippy egg was a staple tea when I was little. I'm going to disconnect again and start down here now because I've kind of stitched myself up into a blind alley up there. I'm just going to jump back out and carry on this way. Yeah, Marmite soldiers was toast made of thin white slice bread. Had to be. This is at my granny's house. And then spread with butter, proper butter. You know, real butter, not a substitute. Quite thickly. And then spread with you only put a bit of Marmite on. You don't put lots because it's really strong. And the Marmite kind of blends with the butter. My mouth's watering now. I don't have Marmite. I don't think you can get it here. And then you have a boiled egg, you know, with the runny yolk. And then you dip your Marmite soldiers into your egg. Oh, I really want that now. I don't know how good it was for children because of the salt content, but anyway. It was, I think my granny thought it was good to give you something savoury rather than sweet. Anyway, never did me any harm. That's what they always say, isn't it? Who knows? So I'm going super big now with my blanket stitches, and some of them are becoming sort of detached because just of the way it's going, but I'm just going with it and letting it happen. You see, these are really sort of almost hanging in space on their own. And I'm back round to my little darn, my little darn. I've given away what I want to do with it in case you hadn't already guessed. My little hole. But that's okay, I just don't want to stitch over it. I'm probably going to end off I'm going to put that in the orts and start a new bit. Yes, Marmite. Oh no, I'm taking two at once now. I was going to take them one at a time because that did seem to work better. So, yeah, that was the result of the experiment. With this particular darning thread, it worked better to take one at a time and put them back together. Vegemite, of course, was made famous outside Australia by men at work in the 80s. Was it the 80s? There was a band. They had a song called, I don't know if it was just called Down Under or I Come From a Land Down Under. And then there is a line, she just smiled and gave me a Vegemite sandwich. And is it the same company even, or is it just the same product? I don't know. If you know, please tell me. If Vegemite and Marmite are the same company. Or if it's just the same product by two different companies. Sometimes things are called different names in different countries, aren't they? I think I'm going to do super big ones on the edge. Don't want that to happen. Just really, you know, like nearly 3/4 of an inch there, I think I went. I'm going to anchor that one down there. And then I'm going to come up over here somewhere. It's quite a big jump on the back, but you know, I don't think it was worth stopping and starting. And I never feel as bad doing that when it's vintage thread and when it's new thread. I know it's not an excuse to waste things just because they're vintage or second-hand or whatever, but that's just how I feel. I got these particular darning threads here. There are 3 boxes. There was one dark blue, one white and one black on a vide grenier type place, you know, the car booty type thing. And I didn't pay very much money for it. I can't remember exactly what I paid, but it wasn't very much. And the lady seemed quite surprised that I wanted it, because it's for mending. And I said, well, I do mend my clothes and so on, but I'm going to use it just as embroidery thread. Why not? You see here, it's like almost a little path coming out with all these, but I like it, so I'm leaving it like that. I'm going to go through there. And come right down here. Oh, that's the wrong end. I know from experience that trying to poke the eye of the needle, the point of the needle through only results in me splitting the thread or catching the cloth. So, but my needles are very sharp, so I guess if you had a blunter needle it might work. But if you really don't like the look of this, well, like I said last week with Borrow to several people, and you know, nobody was complaining that they didn't like it, but I can imagine it's disappointing if you look forward to the prompt and it's something you really don't like at all. So that's why I do try to give alternatives. For the Borrow, I couldn't really. I guess I could have said that you can just stitch it one-sided onto a foundation, but I really wanted to convey the feeling of building up a cloth over time, you know, and the story in it and so forth. So, but if this organicness really doesn't appeal to you, you could just do regular blanket stitch, you know, more in lines or make shapes or something like that, if that was something that you liked more. Now you see there I've got a straight line, a great big straight line, but do I mind? I don't think so. I don't think I mind. I think it's fine. Oops. I'm going to come right down there. Yeah, so I quite like that steppy that's going on there. Or something completely different, you know. Sometimes people go off in a completely different direction. Do you see there, I'm not trapping the loop at all because it's the loops that side of the stitch. I'm going to do that, which is kind of almost a couching stitch. And then I'm going to go back up here and start in empty space again. Because I'm really trying over the whole year to have a variety of things, you know, to cover lots of different things. Two reasons. One is and I've done the same thing again, and I'm going to couch it down. One is I like to do, I mean, I have obviously favourites, and if you've seen a lot of my work, you'll see, you know, you'll maybe recognise the things I really like to do, because they keep coming up again and again. But it's always nice to have some variety. And the other thing is, this is for a lot of you, you know, this is for lots of people who are not all the same. So I'm really trying to make sure that you at least enjoy some of the weeks. I guess if you didn't enjoy any of the weeks, then you wouldn't still be here, you know. But do you see what I mean? So there's something that some weeks you'll love, some weeks you won't love so much, some weeks you might find challenging, some will be right in your comfort zone, and so on. Okay, so I'm done. I think I'm done with the blanket stitch. I like the shape, I like the radiating lines, the movement in it. I'm done with that. I'm calling that done. I'm going to end that off. And I'm sure you all understand that. And I'm sure when you say you found it challenging, it's not a criticism of me. Sometimes I hear things as criticisms when they're not. It's just my personality. I just don't like people to be unhappy, and especially not for anything, because of something I've done or not done. Okay, so I'm going to darn this this little hole. What am I going to darn it with? I don't know. I think I want something fairly neutral because I don't really want to detract. Should have got something ready, but I didn't think of it. Maybe use this. This is another kind of mending cotton, which is English mending cotton out of a workbox that I bought. I think I used it in Wonky Wednesday recently. I can't remember which one. It's the same 4 strands, much finer than floss. It's lovely for piecing. That's where I used it. I used it in the bento box. It's lovely for piecing because it's so fine and soft, but it's not so old, and you know, it's been well looked after, so it's sturdy. But I'm going to use 2 strands for my little darn. Come on. Which you're not going to be able to see probably. Where's my needle now? There it is. There's a whole pincushion full of needles, but I want this certain one because it's my favourite needle. My favourite number 8 because it's got a very slight bend in it. Right. Because darning, mending, comforting, you know, it just seems to fit. It just seems to fit to me. So I've got 2 holes here. I'm going to start with this biggest one. And I'm just going to do some long stitches straight across. And take a tiny stitch there on that side that you can see well enough if you need to. And then back again, going maybe 1/8 of an inch over. I'm doing the stitches quite firm because they can tend to loosen up a bit when you start weaving in and out the other way. I'm trapping that fluffiness, but I don't want to cut it off because it's nice. Go away, Fluffy. And I'm just making sure I go just into, I mean, this is, you know, only decorative playing. If you were doing it seriously, you just need to make sure that you're going into good cloth, because that's like the scaffolding that the darn hangs on. And then because those are a little bit far apart, then I'll just come back in between and go back the other way, putting another long stitch in between. And this is making the warp. Now I'm chuckling because when I was stewarding with a colleague of mine who's an experienced weaver, and one of the lovely people who'd come in was talking about weaving as well, so we were having and I was saying weaving something I've always fancied doing, but I've never really done apart from cloth weaving, and very occasionally I've done little projects of, if I've found an interesting bit of wood in the woods, I've you know, like a vine, I've got a piece of vine that's been round a tree root, it's in the other room, or I'll show it to you one day, and I made tiny holes and put a warp across and wove through. Anyway, apart from things like that, you know, which aren't proper weaving, I'm not a proper weaver. And I revealed this lack of knowledge on my part by saying, oh, the thing that put me off weaving properly, you know, on a big loom, is all the wefting up that you have to do in the beginning. And of course it's warping up, isn't it? The warp's the first thing you put, not the weft. So yeah, made myself look a bit silly. But, you know, can't know everything about all the things. And I think I did know, I just forgot, in my defence. So now I've come up here at the end, and I'm going to come back through, and again I'm using the eye of the needle, and I'm literally going under, over, you know, weaving. You know how you weave. I saw Machtelt doing this recently, on Daily Dose of Paper. I can't remember which video, because I've been catching up all the ones while I was away. And she did the warp threads white and then wove through with black, and that looked really cool. Styles! Sorry, she was scratching. Nervous scratching and a bit her allergies. So then coming back the other way, you just do the opposite. You know, you go over where you went under and under where you went over. And I'm really sorry if you need to see and you can't, because I've chosen a toning thread. And then when I come to the end, I always anchor it by stitching down through. Just straight down. And then if you really want to get your weave tight, I'm not going to bother here because it's just decorative, then you can push it with your needle, with the eye of your needle, you know, so it butts up against the previous one. Turn it round. Over, I can't even see, so you've got no chance. Over, under, over, under. It's lovely to do. I'm doing it a lot on that scroll I'm working on that I showed you recently. The one that's, you know, the cloths that have been hanging outside for 10 years. There's a lot of holes in that, not surprisingly, when I treat it like that. That I'm doing little darns in. I just love doing it. And it just goes for me with blankets, and I find mending generally a very comforting activity. I guess I'm lucky that I don't have to, you know, it's a different thing. We talked a little bit last week with Borrow about poverty and having to do things. Well, that's not the same as most of us now have the luxury of choosing to do things, or it's a different, I think I said it last time. It's different, isn't it? We maybe are choosing to be more careful with materials for environmental reasons rather than for personal thrift reasons, although there is that as well, you know. I am not a hugely wealthy woman by any stretch of the imagination. I have to make my decisions about what I choose to spend my money on, the same way that I make decisions about my carbon footprint. And I don't want to get all eco-warrior all over you, but I had some criticism that I'd flown to England from somebody who got quite unpleasant, so I removed the comment, who basically called me a hypocrite. And I didn't respond to the person because one of you lovely people responded on my behalf and in my defence. But we all have an impact on the planet. It's impossible not to. and I think the most we can do is make my personal, as always, my personal thoughts and feelings. I'm not judging anybody. Is that all we can do is make informed decisions about, you know, the impact that we have and so on. But anyway, I didn't really appreciate this person's comments, and I do find it's very difficult, because I do find it upsetting, because it's a human being, you know, that's a human being talking to me, a human being, and it seems to happen via the internet, and people are more, probably oftentimes more vehement than they would be if they were face to face with you. Maybe not, you know, but you don't have a chance to discuss and explain, you just have things thrown at you. Anyway, sorry, I'm not whinging. I absolutely do not feel the need to reassure me in the comments. You know, it's lovely that you do that, but I'm fine with it. I'm gradually growing a thicker skin. Most of you, nearly all of you, nearly all of you, there's only one or two in the whole time I've been doing this, the whole few months I've been doing this, there's only been one or two really nasty comments, so I've been very, you know, because I hear from other people that it happens more often. But yeah, just delete them and move on, I think is the answer. I'm just going to do another little darn over here now to make myself feel better, because it stirred me up a bit. I'm sorry. I am only human, and I know you all know that. You know you see me as a human woman, you know, a human person with feelings and so on. I'm not, as I now have to declare when I make these videos, I am not artificial intelligence. Yes, really, I now have to declare that. And I just think some people don't realise that. Oh, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. Let's move on. Let's not talk about it anymore. Right, so I'm just doing a very open darn here. I've done 3 stitches one way, and I'm going to do 3 the other, I think, maybe. So it's almost like a little, what in England we call, or in Britain we call, noughts and crosses, and I believe across the pond you call it tic-tac-toe, and I don't know what you call it in other countries. You know, when you draw a grid, which is a nine patch in effect, and then you take turns putting noughts and crosses in it, or zeros and X's, and then the first person to get 3 in a line. You know the game. Right, there we go. That's it. So that's my little piece. I can leave that attached because I can use that to sew that in. So I'm going to do that. Move all this out of the way. Get the journal in. Oh, I have to look up the quote. I don't have a copy of Shakespeare here. There's one downstairs. A copy of The Tempest. I'll just show you this first. I might have to pause and go and look it up. So the haiku that was written for me by, I wrote on a piece of paper the person's name, which I wanted to write here as well. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but ba, and then a new word ka, baka. That was the person who wrote me the haiku for my dad, which is, spring breath stirs old cloth, hankies patch the worn heart's tears or tears, you could say either. Hankies patch the worn heart's tears, mending souls with thread. And then I've written Dolly Parton, A Coat of Many Colours. I couldn't write the whole song because of copyright, and it's really, the whole song is the story, so please go and look it up if you don't know it. And the other person I wanted to mention, and I will put a link in the description, was a Swedish lady who is in our lovely community called Eva, told me about a gentleman called Takayo Momiyama, who lives now in Sweden but who is Japanese and who works with Borrow. And I found a website, fiberarts.se or something like that, but I'll put a link. And there was a little 15-minute video of him talking, showing some of his own work and showing some authentic 100+ years old Borrow pieces. And the weight of it, it's a wonderful video. So, I'll put a link, you can go and watch that if you're interested. just as a follow-up to the borrow. Okay. I'm going to guess that I'm right about Gonzalo and apologise in advance to the bard if I get it wrong. I'm pretty sure it's weighing sorrow with comfort. Why didn't I write it down? Weighing sorrow with comfort. I'm going to write it down now in case I forget. It's close enough. It's the sense I want. So here's my little piece. There's my needle. See which way round I want it. When I debate which way round, there's always some of you say, oh, it was the wrong way, and others go, yeah, you did it the right way. So again, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do, you can do polls, because, you know, it'd probably be 50-50, and where would that get us? No, so, do I want it with the darns there? I'm a little bit affected by my thread, although I could, of course, take my thread off. I think I like it down there with the darns there and the fluff on that edge, so that's what I'm going for. Apologies if you thought I should have put it differently. I'm just going to stitch a little bit through the backing to get myself up to the edge. I'm going to just, whoops, now I've unthreaded my needle after all that. And now I've taken to only to stitching it along that one edge because it's getting really difficult here to get closer to the spine. I'm going to have to trim it under an angle because it won't go through now. They were different lengths. So we've had some discussion here and there in the Facebook group and so on about stitch journals and how to make them. If you're fairly new and you haven't seen, there are two series of videos, one a two-part as to how I made this, where I just sewed the papers in, and then there's another, I think it's a 4-part video, but I don't think you need to watch all of it to know how to make the journal, which is called a borrow-inspired journal, and there it has signatures that are tied in, so you can take them out if you find that easier. But from now on, I just sew to this edge of the page, and I find that pretty straightforward. You just have to have all this bulk towards you and stitch through there. I like to have the finished book to start with, if that makes sense at all. You know, I like to have the finished book to work in. It's just what I like. It's just what I like. So my edge is going to stick out, but that's okay. I want to sew my fluff down. This is the thinner bit. I've got two kinds of sketchbook paper in this journal, and this is the thinner kind. And it's I can just stitch through it normally. A couple more. So I talked quite a lot about what I was doing because it seemed necessary, and less wittering than normal maybe. But my theme was, or our theme was, comfort and sorrow and blankets. And I am going to snip that off. And I don't think I'm doing it. I haven't done the dangle for ages, but I just don't think I want to do a dangle. We are the 27th of May. Try not to get my head in the shot. 27/5/2024. Sign it. And kiss. And weighing sorrow. Why have I written Sopho? I need a rubber. That's not a rubber. Oh, there it is. I don't know why. I think in my head I had comfort and then the F. Here's a rubber. Sorry. So I may be misquoting the bard because I have a funny feeling it's weighing comfort with sorrow, but I wanted comfort to be second. So, you know, we're loosely quoting. It's the sense of it. Weighing sorrow with comfort. I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm not going to say it's Shakespeare or anything. I don't think he'll come after me. He's from 1600 and something, isn't he? But if I need to add more to that, I'll either put a caption or I'll talk about it next week. But that was the sense of what I wanted to say, really, was we all have sorrows in our life for various reasons, but I hope that we all also have comfort, and if we weigh one against the other, that sometimes the sorrow outweighs the comfort, but hopefully for all of us at one point the comfort outweighs the sorrow. Does that make sense? I hope so. I hope so. So that's my piece with my blanket stitch and my little Mendy darns, a bit of Dad's hanky and some of his pyjamas in the middle. And yeah, I just wanted to incorporate that blanket stitch because there's been a lot of discussion about it lately. So I hope you like that. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to you joining me next time for more cloth tales. Bye bye.